Story 1, Betrayed by a Friend. Revenge done right. I had trusted Daniel for years. It's not just as a friend, but as a partner in ideas, plans, and shared ambitions. We had grown up together, gone through the awkward phases of early adulthood, and dreamed aloud of opportunities that could change our lives. So when we decided to explore a small business venture together, it felt natural. I never imagined betrayal would creep in so silently, so deliberately. The idea was simple: a boutique online store specializing in custom home decor. We spent months researching suppliers, testing products, and designing a website that reflected both of our tastes. Handled marketing strategy, customer engagement, and logistics planning, while Daniel focused on technical setups and client interactions. I trusted him completely, believing that friendship meant honesty and shared accountability. The first warning signs were subtle. Meetings he scheduled didn't include full updates. Emails went unanswered, or worse, replies came only after a delay, often contradicting previous plans. I chalked it up to growing pains, to differing work styles, trying to stay patient. But the unease lingered like a shadow at the edge of every task. Then came the pivotal moment, an email notification that froze me mid-scroll. Daniel had registered a second, identical company under his name alone, using the business idea we had brainstormed together. The logo, the design, the product line, everything mirrored what we had created. The betrayal wasn't public, yet the personal violation cut deeper than any humiliation could. I felt anger, disbelief, and heartbreak all at once. Not a friend, a trusted partner, had attempted to steal not only an idea, but a portion of my identity, the effort, the vision, the work we had done together. But I realized quickly that reacting impulsively wouldn't help. Rage might feel justified, but it wouldn't correct the wrongdoing. Strategy and patience would. I began by documenting everything: original emails, brainstorming notes, design drafts, supplier communications, a digital paper trail of our collaboration. Each piece of evidence became part of a record, a safeguard against denial. I had to remain calm, methodical, and deliberate. Public exposure would come, but only when the situation was airtight. The opportunity for indirect justice arose when a major client expressed interest in our niche market. They wanted a bespoke collection, but when they inquired with Daniel's company, subtle inconsistencies emerged. Supplier agreements didn't align with his claims, delivery timelines were off, and branding inconsistencies made the professional veneer fragile. I had anticipated these flaws, and now they became part of the strategy. I reached out to the client quietly, presenting a comprehensive plan with documented proof that our team, meaning me, had created the original concept. Emails, designs, and contracts illustrated that the intellectual property and groundwork belonged to me. I did not attack Daniel directly. I presented facts, letting the evidence speak for itself. The client's response was immediate. They appreciated transparency and professionalism, recognizing that Daniel's venture was derivative, incomplete, and misleading. They contracted with me instead, granting exclusivity for the project. The irony was rich. Daniel had tried to profit from our shared vision, only to lose credibility and opportunity because of his own hubris and shortcuts. Meanwhile, I ensured my approach remained professional. I didn't post accusations publicly, didn't involve mutual friends in gossip, and avoided the temptation to humiliate Daniel. The goal wasn't vengeance for humiliation's sake. It was restoration of justice, recognition of my contribution, and protection of future opportunity. In the following weeks, Daniel attempted to salvage his version of the business. Suppliers were reluctant to cooperate, citing discrepancies in contracts and reputational concerns. Potential clients questioned authenticity, and slowly the shadow of his attempted betrayal became evident to all involved. The damage was not immediate, but inevitable. I often reflected on the situation during quiet evenings. Trust, once broken, can be restored only with transparency and accountability. Daniel's betrayal illustrated how short-sighted manipulation can undermine long-term goals. Actions intended to deceive often carry consequences far beyond the initial intent. My patience, careful planning, and strategic intervention ensured that justice was achieved without compromising my own principles. The culmination came during an industry networking event. Daniel, unaware that I would attend, began boasting about his successful venture. I remained calm, observing and listening. When conversation turned to the client project, I simply stated, "Oh, we completed that." I handled the concept, design, and implementation personally. The room paused. Suppliers and peers present had already seen the evidence of Daniel's misstep. He tried to respond, but the weight of factual documentation and professional recognition was undeniable. The lesson was clear: betrayal, when met with calm intelligence and strategic action, can be addressed without conflict or public drama. The power of preparation, patient observation, factual presentation ensured that I retained credibility while Daniel faced the consequences of his actions. Months later, my business flourished. The project was successful, clients were satisfied, and the brand I nurtured from inception gained recognition in the market. Daniel continued his venture, but without momentum, credibility, or the client base he had hoped to capture. It was a quiet, methodical triumph, no theatrics, just the inevitable unfolding of consequence. Reflecting on the experience, I realized how essential careful observation is in professional and personal relationships. Immediate reaction may satisfy momentary emotion, but strategic, patient action ensures long-term effectiveness. The betrayal was painful, but it revealed my capacity for resilience, foresight, and professional integrity. Even now, when confronted with challenges or competition, I remember that day as a quiet reminder. Injustice, deceit, and betrayal can be countered not by confrontation alone, but by preparation, evidence, and strategic exposure. It is the careful, patient mind that often prevails over impulsive deception. The experience with Daniel reshaped my approach to collaboration, trust, and accountability. I became more attentive to documentation, more careful in establishing ownership, and more deliberate in monitoring actions that could undermine collective or personal effort. Patience and observation became my tools, allowing me to navigate betrayal without compromising ethics or professionalism. In the end, the ironic twist, his attempt to capitalize on our shared vision becoming his own undoing, was a testament to the power of strategic patience. Justice had been served quietly, effectively, and irrevocably, leaving lessons not only for him, but for anyone who observes and learns. And as I moved forward, I carried with me the understanding that while betrayal can hurt deeply, the response need not be reactive. Calm intelligence, thorough documentation, and strategic action ensure that the scales of fairness balance naturally, sometimes more decisively than anger ever could. Story 2. The neighbor who got what was coming. I had always considered myself a patient person. Living in an apartment complex meant dealing with minor inconveniences, the occasional loud music, footsteps above me, or a forgotten trash bin in the hallway. But there was one neighbor who tested every ounce of my patience, Mrs. Thompson. From the moment she moved in, she seemed determined to make life difficult for everyone around her. At first, the complaints were subtle. A polite note slipped under my door about noise levels, a comment about trash placement, reminders about shared parking etiquette. I complied. I wanted to maintain peace, believing that minor compromises were worth keeping the atmosphere civil. But her behavior escalated quickly. The polite notes became scathing letters, criticizing everything from the way I trimmed my plants to the timing of when I took out my recycling. If the wind carried the slightest sound of my music into her apartment, she called management immediately. Even guests were scrutinized. A friend staying for one night became a source of her wrath. The turning point came during a particularly stressful week. I had stayed late at work for an important project, arrived home exhausted, and only wanted to relax. As I opened my door, I noticed another note from her, posted brazenly on my doorknob. "Please consider your neighbors. Your inconsiderate behavior is unacceptable." It was typed, formatted, and passive-aggressively sharp. My patience was fraying, but I decided no reaction, not yet. Instead, I began observing her behavior carefully. I noted her routines, when she left, when she returned, and how she interacted with other neighbors. I watched for patterns, small habits, and potential vulnerabilities. It wasn't about malice. It was about finding a way for karma to naturally balance the scales. The opportunity presented itself during a community garden project. Residents were asked to participate in a shared initiative, planting flowers, maintaining common spaces, and contributing to monthly landscaping. Mrs. Thompson volunteered immediately, taking charge with exaggerated authority. She assigned tasks with precision, criticized minor mistakes, and made sure everyone knew she was in control. I played along, offering minimal but correct contributions, letting her direct the effort. I observed quietly, noticing how she favored those who praised her and subtly undermined those who didn't. Then came the perfect moment. One afternoon, a small, harmless prank appeared. A mischievous squirrel had managed to tip over a planter she had spent hours arranging. She arrived to see the chaos, soil scattered, plants crooked, her meticulous arrangement destroyed. Her reaction was instant: frustration, panic, and disbelief. But the twist was subtle. She had ignored several safety precautions in her setup, creating an environment that made this mishap almost inevitable. I didn't intervene directly. I simply offered assistance politely, making sure other neighbors saw that I was helping quietly without commentary. The community, who had grown tired of her constant criticism, observed the irony unfold naturally. She had invested so much energy into controlling every detail that when something went wrong, through no malicious intent of mine, it highlighted her obsession with control and the inevitability of unforeseen events. Over the following weeks, the universe seemed to conspire in small, poetic ways. A misdelivered package, a minor plumbing leak, and an accidentally double-booked community hall event each caused mild but noticeable frustration. All without any direct action from me. Mrs. Thompson's reputation as a perfectionist tyrant began to erode naturally. Neighbors who had quietly endured her complaints began speaking up, asserting boundaries politely but firmly. The satisfaction wasn't about gloating. It was about observation and understanding that sometimes the consequences of overbearing behavior manifest naturally by staying patient, calm, and aware. I allowed the situation to unfold in a way that revealed the imbalance she had created. One particularly memorable day involved the community's annual block party. Mrs. Thompson had insisted on organizing every detail: decorations, music, seating arrangements, and demanded that everyone comply with her instructions. I attended as usual, staying cooperative but attentive. When the music playlist failed due to a technical glitch, she tried to shift blame onto everyone else. However, the audience neighbors who had grown weary of her control subtly expressed their support for others, not her, and the social dynamics shifted in a way that highlighted her mismanagement. By the end of the party, the lesson had been delivered. Mrs. Thompson was left to reflect on her need for control. Her constant criticism and the small ways in which her actions had alienated others. The humor of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. She had attempted to orchestrate perfection. But life, with its unpredictable events, had exposed her overzealousness. I continued living in the apartment with a renewed sense of calm, followed the rules, respected neighbors, quietly observed. Mrs. Thompson's complaints decreased over time. Her influence waned, and the community atmosphere improved naturally. Patience, observation, and allowing events to unfold without direct confrontation had achieved a balance that anger or retaliation never could have. Reflecting on the experience, I understood a few key lessons. People who attempt to dominate, criticize, or control often create the very circumstances for their downfall. Attempting to force outcomes through negativity rarely works. Natural consequences, timing, and subtle exposure often achieve more lasting results. My own patience became a strength, allowing me to witness justice unfold without compromising my integrity. Months later, Mrs. Thompson adjusted her behavior. The complaints ceased. Her involvement became more collaborative rather than directive, and the community regained a sense of harmony. The subtle lesson of karma, observation, and patience had delivered its verdict quietly, effectively, and irreversibly. Even now, when I think back, I smile at the irony. Life has a way of balancing itself when overzealous control collides with the unpredictable nature of human interaction. I never needed to orchestrate revenge directly. I simply allowed events, timing, and natural consequences to reveal the truth. It was a reminder that patience, calm, intelligence, and quiet observation can turn frustration into understanding, tension into satisfaction, and overbearing behavior into a lesson for those willing to notice. Karma, when left to its own devices, is often more effective than any direct confrontation. And in the end, that is far more satisfying than shouting, arguing, or engaging in petty retaliation. It's a quiet victory, one that restores balance, dignity, and peace without compromising one's own principles.